I knew she'd invited him the moment I saw the seating chart. Not because his name was written in gold calligraphy, though it was, but because the font was 2 points larger than everyone else's. Tori always did that when she wanted to make a point. Or a threat. I didn't say anything. Just stood there in the private dining room at the Pierre, thumb rubbing the edge of the heavy cardstock, while the maitre d' hovered nearby like he was waiting for me to explode. I didn't. I handed it back to him, smooth, calm, and said, "Looks fine." It wasn't fine. Sebastian Hale, her ex-husband, the same guy who'd nearly tanked 2 hedge funds and was currently dodging a subpoena from the Southern District of New York, sitting at the head table, next to the chairman of the board, my father-in-law. You saw it, Marcus said, stepping up beside me. He had a whiskey sour in one hand, and a look on his face like he'd already done the math on how bad this could get. I saw it. I said, "You wanted to talk to Richard?" "No." I adjusted my cufflinks. Platinum, understated. The kind that says I don't need to show off. Let him see it for himself. Marcus sipped his drink. "She's playing a dangerous game." "Nate, she's not playing." I said, "She's declaring something." He raised an eyebrow. "And you're just gonna let her?" I turned to look at him. "I'm letting them all watch." The room was filling up. Langford Company, S senior leadership, half the board, a few hedge fund guys who'd flown in from Connecticut for the free Kobe beef and better gossip. Everyone was dressed like they were about to close a 9-figure deal, because most of them were. This wasn't a dinner. It was a power audit with a dessert course. Tori swept in 10 minutes late, which was early by her standards. She was in a black satin gown that probably cost more than most people's annual bonuses. Hair pinned up, diamond drops grazing her collarbones. She kissed my cheek, lingering just long enough to smell like money, and Chanel no. 5. Smile. "Nathan," she murmured, "tonight's about us." I smiled. "Us. Right." She pulled back, studying me. "You're not surprised." Should I be? Her eyes flicked toward the entrance. Sebastian had just walked in, shaking hands with Elena Park like they were old friends. They weren't. Elena hated him. Everyone who'd ever read a 10K hated him. "He's back from London," Tori said, like that explained everything. "Since when does the SEC grant travel visas to subject of active investigations?" She laughed softly, always so literal. I leaned in, voice low. "You want to humiliate me. Fine, but you're not just embarrassing me. You're dragging the company into your personal mess." "Our personal mess," she corrected. Then she patted my arm and glided away, toward the head table, where Richard Langford was already frowning into his water glass. I caught Marcus watching me. "You good?" "I'm always good." I said, "I just like knowing where the exits are." Dinner started with a scallop dish nobody ate. Too busy networking. Too busy staring at Sebastian, who was holding court like he owned the place, which, technically, he used to, until the divorce settlement stripped him of his Langford shares and Tori installed herself as CEO. Elena Park was the first to break the ice. She leaned forward, glass in hand, and said loud enough for the table to hear, "Sebastian, last I checked, you were supposed to be keeping a low profile." He grinned. "Elena, still auditing people's morals instead of their books?" A few nervous chuckles. Richard cleared his throat. "Let's keep the evening civil." "I'm being civil," Sebastian said. "I flew 12 hours to celebrate Victoria's anniversary. That's called loyalty." "Loyalty," I repeated, finally joining the conversation. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Interesting word choice. Most people associate with not stealing from your spouse's company. Silence. Tori's fork paused midair. She didn't look at me. "Nathan, just making conversation." I said, "Sebastian and I were discussing fiduciary duty earlier. In the abstract, of course." Sebastian's smile tightened. "Always the lawyer, aren't you, Cole? Always the guy who reads the fine print." I said, "Especially when it involves material misrepresentations to the SEC." Richard set his glass down with a sharp click. "That's enough." I shrugged. just pointing out that inviting a person of interest in a federal investigation to a board-level event might raise questions about judgment and liability. Elena nodded slowly. He's not wrong. Torai finally turned to me. Her expression was ice. You're making this about you. I'm making this about risk. I said, there's a difference. Sebastian leaned back, swirling his wine. You know, Victoria, I almost forgot how much fun these dinners used to be before the prenups and the restraining orders. That got a laugh, brief, uncomfortable. Richard's jaw clenched. I pulled out my phone, pretended to check a message. Really, I was reading the latest update from Marcus's assistant. Compliance team has been briefed. Elena's legal counsel is present. Richard asked for the bylaws. Perfect. I set the phone down and met Tori's eyes. You want to do this here? Fine. But remember, you built this stage. I'm just a narrator. She opened her mouth to reply, but Richard stood. The room quieted instantly. Before we continue, he said, voice steady, I want to address the elephant in the room. Sebastian, it's unexpected to see you. Good unexpected? Sebastian offered. No, Richard said flatly. Not particularly. Torai started to speak, but Richard held up a hand. Victoria, you're my daughter. I love you, but Langford Company is a public company. We have a responsibility to our shareholders, our employees, and yes, the law. Having you sit inches away from a man under federal investigation at a high-profile event sends a message, one I'm not comfortable with. Elena chimed in. I've already fielded 3 calls from institutional investors asking if we've lost our minds. 4, Marcus added quietly. Richard gnawed. So here's what's going to happen. Sebastian, you're welcome to finish your meal. But after coffee, I'm calling an emergency session of the governance committee, effective immediately. Victoria, you'll be recusing yourself from all board matters until we can assess any potential conflict of interest. Torai went very still. Dad, this isn't a debate. Richard said, this is damage control. I stayed silent. Let it land. Let her feel the weight of every pair of eyes suddenly avoiding hers. Sebastian, to his credit, didn't gloat. He just took a sip of wine and said, politics always ruins the appetite. I leaned toward Tori. Voice pitched for her ears only. You wanted a scene. Congratulations. You got one. She didn't respond, but under the table. Her heel found my shin and pressed down. Hard. I didn't flinch. Pain was just data. And right now, the data said she was panicking. After dinner, as people drifted toward the cigar lounge, I hung back. Marcus fell into step beside me. That went better than expected. It's not over. I said, no, but the board spooked. Elena's already drafting a statement. Richard's at the general counsel scrubbing the guest list. I stopped near the elevators. She knew this would happen. Torai? Yeah. She wanted the confrontation. Wanted to force Richard's hand. I watched the numbers above the elevator climb, which means she's got a plan B. Marcus frowned. You think she's got something on Elena? Or on me? I turned to him, pulled a full audit trail on the Zurich accounts. Every transaction since 2019. You think she's been moving money? I think she's been preparing for a divorce since the day we got married. The elevator dinged. Doors opened. I stepped in. And I think Sebastian's not just here for nostalgia. Marcus held the door. What do you want me to do? Keep Elena close. Make sure she knows I'm not the enemy. Not yet. And Tori? I hit the button for the lobby. Let her come to me. She will. The doors closed. I stare at my reflection in the polished metal, tie straight, jaw tight, eyes cold, somewhere above. Torai was probably on the phone, spinning the night into a victory. She'd always been good at rewriting history. But I'd learned a long time ago, the best endings aren't written by the person who speaks loudest. They're written by the person who listens. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. One line. Check the hail clause. Page 14. Attachment B. I smiled. Game on. I didn't move from the elevator. Just stood there, rereading the text. Page 14. Attachment B. I knew the document. The Langford, Hale postnuptial agreement, drafted after their divorce but before Tori took the CEO chair. I'd skimmed it once during our own prenup negotiations, mostly boilerplate, mostly boring. But page 14, I hadn't looked twice. Until now, I thumbed reply. Who is this? No answer. Typical. I stepped out into the lobby, bypassed the bar, and headed for the town car idling at the curb. My driver, James, nodded but didn't speak. He knew better. I pulled up the cloud folder Marcus had shared last month. Full access to Langford's corporate docs, including the Hale agreement. I scrolled to page 14. Attachment B, labeled Equity Reversion in event of termination for cause. I read it 3 times. If Victoria Langford was removed as CEO due to a breach of fiduciary duty, gross negligence, or conduct materially detrimental to the company's reputation, her remaining Class B shares, 18% of the float, didn't revert to the board. They transferred to a blind trust. And the named beneficiary of that trust? Sebastian Hale, son of a bitch. I leaned back against the leather seat. So that was the play. Tori wasn't just humiliating me. She was setting up a coup, get herself fired, trigger the clause, and hand the keys to Sebastian on a silver platter. Then they'd either flip the board or sell the company out from under Richard. Clean, quiet, legal, almost. I dialed Marcus. He picked up on the second ring. You still at the hotel? Just left. Where are you? In a car. Read page 14 yet? A pause. Shit. Yeah. How the hell did this never surface in Discovery? Because it's not in the divorce decree. I said, it's a side letter. Separate signing. Probably executed the same day she got the CEO title. Richard signed off on it, thinking it protected the family stake. He didn't realize the beneficiary wasn't Tori. It was Sebastian. Marcus swore again. Elena is going to lose her mind. Elena already knows. I said, or she suspects. Why else would she push for a vote tonight? You think she's playing both sides? I think Elena Park doesn't play sides. She plays outcomes. I watched the city blur past. Call her. Tell her you've got new information on the Hale Trust. Don't mention me. Let her think it's a gift. And if she asks where it came from, tell her a concerned shareholder. That's all she needs to know. I hung up and opened a new message thread. This time, I typed carefully. You're not as clever as you think. Neither is he. And send it to Tori's private line, not the one she gave the press. The one she used for things she didn't want archived. 3 minutes later, my phone rang. You're digging, she said. No greeting. No preamble. You're predictable. I said, invite the ex to a board dinner the week before the shareholder meeting? That's not bold. That's desperate. Desperate is leaking your own wife's contracts to press. I haven't leaked anything. I said, yet. Silence. Then, what do you want? Nathan? I want you to stop pretending this is about us. It's not. It's about Langford Company. And if you go through with this, you're not just burning the company. You're burning your father. My father stopped caring about me the day he made me CEO. She said, voice flat, this is me taking back what's mine. By giving it to Sebastian? By making sure it doesn't end up with you. I laughed. Cold. Short. You really think I want Langford? I've got cold capital. I've got liquidity. I've got options. You're the one clinging to a legacy that doesn't even like you. Another silence. Longer. Then, you don't know what you're talking about. I know page 14. I said, I know attachment B. And I know that if the board votes tonight, and they will, Sebastian gets the shares. But here's the thing. Tori, the SEC doesn't like surprise transfers of control, especially not to guys under investigation. You trigger that clause, and the whole deal gets frozen pending review, which means no voting rights, no sale, no leverage. You'd report it? I'd let Elena report it. I said, she's been looking for a reason to clean house. You're handing it to her. She exhaled. Sharp. You're bluffing. Am I? Call Richard. Ask him if he remembers signing a waiver of notice for the trust beneficiary change. Ask him if he ever saw the final version of Attachment B. I heard a door close. She'd moved somewhere quieter. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to understand the rules. I said, you want a war? Fine, but fight it with both eyes open. Right now, you're staring at a chessboard while I'm playing poker. You always were a terrible husband, she said, and you were always a better strategist than a wife. I replied, we're even. I ended the call before she could respond. Back at the apartment, I poured a drink and opened my laptop, pulled up the bylaws. Section 407, removal of officers, required a majority vote of the independent directors. Elena had 5 votes locked. Richards was a toss-up. 2 others, Murphy and Chun, were wild cards. I sent a calendar invite to Murphy for 7 a.m. Subject, Langford Governance Update. No details. He'd show. They always did when the subject was risk. Then I drafted an email to the general counsel. Not to send, just to frame the logic. Potential reporting obligations under Item 5. 02B of Form 8K. If Tory was out, the company had 4 business days to disclose. But if the circumstances involved fraud or misconduct, the clock started ticking the moment the board became aware. Meaning, tonight, I leaned back, checked my phone. Another text, same unknown number. She's already moved the money. Zurich, December 12th. December 12th, the day after our anniversary last year, while we were in St. Bart's. She was wiring millions to an account linked to Sebastian's Cayman entity. I didn't have proof yet, but I knew where to look. I replied, keep talking. This time, the response came fast. Elena's not your ally. She's the one who told Sebastian about the clause. Well, that explained the timing. I set the phone down and stared at the skyline. Somewhere uptown, Tori was realizing her plan had holes. Somewhere downtown, Elena was calculating how to use those holes to bury both of them. And Sebastian? He was probably already counting shares that weren't his yet. I finished a drink and opened a new document. Title, Langford Contingency Plan. Step 1, secure Murphy and Chun. Step 2, freeze the trust. Step 3, force Elena to choose between a scandal and a settlement. And step 4, make sure Tori understood that if she wanted a divorce, she'd get one, but not on her terms. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was Marcus. Elena's calling an emergency board meeting, he said. 10 a.m. via Zoom. She's circulating a draft resolution for removal, for suspension, pending investigation, and she's citing potential violations of the Code of Conduct and undisclosed conflicts of interest. I smiled. Attachment B? She hasn't mentioned it explicitly, but she's asking for immediate access to all postmarital agreements and trust documents. Good, I said. Let her dig. She'll find exactly what I want her to find. You sure about this? Nate, if this blows up, it takes Langford down with it. Langford's already on fire. I said, I'm just deciding who gets burned. I hung up and stood by the window. Somewhere in the city, a siren wailed. Somewhere in my inbox, a draft complaint was waiting to be finalized. And somewhere in Tori's mind, the realization was dawning that she wasn't the only one who'd been planning. I typed one last note to myself. Don't let her see you sweat. Don't let Elena think you need her. And don't let Sebastian forget. He's not the only one who knows how to hide money. I shut the laptop. Tomorrow, the board would vote. Tonight, the game had already changed. I didn't sleep, didn't try. By 5:12 a.m., I was back in the office, espresso in one hand, the Hail Post-Nup spread across 3 monitors. Attachment B wasn't just a poison pill. It was a dead man switch. Marcus showed up at 6. Tie loose, eyes bloodshot. He dropped into the chair across from me and slid over a manila folder. Zurich, December 12th. Same day you and Tori landed in St. Bart's. Inside, a wire transfer receipt. $4. $2 million from a Langford subsidiary in Dublin to a numbered account at UBS Zurich. Beneficiary, S. Hale Consulting Limited, registered in the Caymans. She moved it through the Irish entity to avoid the intercompany disclosure threshold. Marcus said, clever. but not clever enough. She wasn't trying to hide it from us. I said she was hiding it from Richard and the auditors. Elena's already asking questions about the Dublin books. I stalled her with a routine reconciliation excuse, but she's not buying it. I tapped the receipt. This is the leverage. If Elena moves to suspend Tory, we don't lead with the trust. We lead with this embezzlement, self-dealing. That triggers automatic notification to the SEC under Item 8. 01. Marcus frowned. You want to go nuclear? I want Elena to think she's going nuclear. I said, if she believes Tory's already crossed a line into criminal conduct, she'll move faster. And when she does, she'll violate the standstill agreement she signed with the activist bloc last quarter. You're using Elena to blow up her own coalition. Exactly. My phone buzzed. Unknown number again. Elena met Sebastian at Bemelman's at 11:42 p.m. Alone. Of course she did. Elena loved Carlisle. Liked being seen in places where the drinks were expensive and the witnesses were discreet. I typed back, did they shake hands? She handed him a folder. Navy blue. Legal size. I smiled. That'd be the draft resolution. Or worse, the unredacted version of Attachment B, complete with Richard's signature. Elena was feeding Sebastian the ammunition to challenge the board's authority. Smart. If Sebastian could claim the trust was valid and Tory's removal was improper, he could sue for control. And Elena, she positioned herself as the neutral arbiter, then swing the institutional votes to whichever side paid more. I forwarded the text to Marcus. Get someone to pull the security logs from the Carlisle. Credit card records. 2. If Elena used a corporate card, we've got her. You think she's working with him? I think Elena works with whoever gives her the cleanest exit. I said, right now, that's Sebastian. But if we make Tory toxic enough, Elena will pivot. She's a scavenger, not a partner. At 7:02 a.m., Kevin Murphy walked in, senior independent director, retired from a Midwest manufacturing firm, but sharp as hell. He nodded at Marcus, then at me. You wanted to talk about governance. I closed the door. I want to talk about exposure. He sat, unbuttoning his suit jacket. I'm listening. I slid the Zurich wire transfer across the desk. December 12th, Dublin to Caymans. Beneficiari, Sebastian Halle. Approved by Victoria Langford. Murphy didn't blink. Just read it twice. You're sure this wasn't disclosed? It wasn't. Marcus said. We checked the 10K, the 8K, the proxy. Nothing. And Elena knows? Elena's known since last night. I said, she met with Sebastian after the dinner. Gave him documents. Murphy leaned back. You're telling me the chair of the governance committee is colluding with a person of interest in an ongoing investigation to shield the CEO from a board inquiry? I'm telling you Elena is protecting her own flank. I said, if this hits the SEC, she's on the hook for failing to supervise. But if she can frame Tory's removal as a personal vendetta, yours or mine, she avoids the whistleblower narrative. Murphy was quiet for a long moment. Then, what do you want from me? I want you to call an emergency meeting of the independent directors before Elena can lock it down. I want a formal inquiry into the Dublin payments, the trust, and Elena's communications with Sebastian. And if Elena pushes back, let her. I said, every time she defends Sebastian, she ties herself closer to him. By the time the SEC starts asking questions, she'll be named in the same footnote as him. Murphy stood. You're playing a dangerous game. Nathan, I'm playing the only game there is. I said, the one where the person who controls the timeline controls the outcome. He left. Marcus looked at me. You think he'll do it? He already is. I said, he's a fiduciary. He doesn't get to look away. At 8:30, my phone rang. Torai. I answered on speaker. Morning. You went through my files. She said, flat. No anger. Just fact. You left the door unlocked. I said, Elena's calling a vote at 9. Suspension pending investigation. I know. She's going to win. Probably. A pause. Then, why aren't you fighting it? Because I don't need to. I said, You're about to discover that getting fired isn't the worst thing that can happen to you. Getting frozen is. What are you talking about? The trust. I said, Attachment B. Once the board votes to suspend you for cause, the shares transfer. But the SEC has a 30-day review period for any change in beneficial ownership involving a party under investigation. During that time, the shares can't be voted, sold, or pledged. Sebastian gets the paper, but not the power. And without the power, he can't launch a tender offer, can't replace the board, can't do a damn thing except watch the clock tick. Silence. Then, quietly, you planned this. I planned for you to plan. I said, there's a difference. You're destroying the company. I'm exposing the rot. I said, you brought the rot in. Torai, you invited it to dinner. She hung up. At 8:55, Marcus stuck his head in. Murphy called the meeting. 9:15. Conference lines open. Elena? Furious. She's demanding to know who leaked the Zurich wire. Let her wonder. I joined the call from my office. 6 voices. Murphy chaired. Elena sounded like she'd been awake for days. I'd like to address the agenda. She began. The purpose of this call is to address recent irregularities involving Ms. Langford's judgment. I prepared a motion to suspend her pending a full review. Murphy cut in. Before we get to that, I'd like to discuss a matter raised by Mr. Cole's office this morning. A wire transfer from our Dublin subsidiary dated December 12th. $4.2 million to an entity connected to Mr. Halle. Silence. Then Elena. Sharp. That's irrelevant to the suspension motion. It's relevant to the question of fiduciary duty. Murphy said, if Ms. Langford authorized a payment to her ex-husband without board approval, that's a breach. Alleged breach. Elena snapped, we haven't verified the document. I verified it. I said, directly with UBS. The account is real. The beneficiary is real. And the authorization signature matches Ms. Langford's filed specimens. Elena's tone shifted. Cooler. Measured. Even if true, this should be handled internally. No need to involve regulators. Too late. I said, once a majority of independent directors becomes aware of a potential violation of securities laws, we have a duty to disclose. Under Item 8.01, you know that, Elena, you're threatening a disclosure? She asked. I'm reminding you of the law. I said, but here's a thought. If you're so concerned about avoiding regulatory scrutiny, maybe you shouldn't have met Sebastian Hale at the Carlisle last night. Maybe you shouldn't have handed him a copy of the Langford Hale trust documents. Another silence, this one heavier. Then Chun, the biotech director. Elena, is that true? I met with Mr. Hale in a professional capacity. Bullshit, Murphy said. You handed him a folder. Navy blue. Legal size. I have a witness. Elena didn't deny it, just sighed. This board is dysfunctional. I'm exercising my right to recuse myself from further discussion of this matter. Noted, Murphy said, but your recusal doesn't absolve you of prior knowledge or potential liability. The vote came quickly after that. 5-1, Elena dissenting. To suspend Tory pending investigation. To notify the SEC within 24 hours. To retain outside counsel to review the trust and the Dublin payments. As the call ended, Marcus appeared in my doorway. She's going to sue. She's going to try. I said, but her lawyers will tell her the same thing yours would tell you once the SEC's involved. The discovery is mutual. And if Sebastian's under investigation, everything he touches becomes evidence. My phone buzzed. Unknown number again. She knows about the Zurich account. She knows you know. She's at the apartment now. Torai. I stood, grabbed my coat. Change of plans. I need you to file the 8K draft with Edgar. Mark it confidential for now. But if I don't call you back in an hour, hit submit. Where you going? Home. I said, time to stop playing chess. I took the elevator down, nodded to James, and got in the car. As we pulled into traffic, I stared at the message. Whoever my source was, they weren't just watching. They were inside. And Tori? She wasn't going to wait for a lawsuit. She was going to burn the house down. I didn't call ahead, didn't warn her. I told James to wait at the curb and took the elevator up alone. The apartment door was unlocked. Professional habit. Hers. Not mine. She always forgot the deadbolt when she was angry. Tori was in the living room, still in last night's gown, now wrinkled, a glass of bourbon in her hand. No ice. The curtains were open. Sunlight cutting across the floor like a blade. You're predictable, she said without turning. And you're sloppy. I said, leaving the door, drinking before noon, meeting with Elena behind the board's back. She turned, eyes red, but sharp. You think you've won. I think the SEC is about to own a significant portion of your life. I said, but sure, let's call it winning. She set the glass down. You don't know what you've done. I know exactly what I've done. I said, I've stopped you from handing Langford to a guy who's about to be indicted. I've stopped Elena from covering her own ass by selling the company out from under your father. And I've stopped you from thinking you're the only one who can play dirty. You're so proud of yourself, she said, but you're missing the bigger picture. Enlighten me. She walked to the desk, my desk, and pulled out a thin folder, tossed it onto the coffee table. Read page 3. I picked it up. Confidential. Internal memo. Dated March 14th. 2019. Subject. Acquisition of Ashworth Fine Goods. Final valuation adjustments. Ashworth. The British luxury brand Sebastian had gutted 3 years ago. The one that collapsed under a pension scandal that wiped out 2,000 retiree savings. I flipped to page 3. There, buried in the footnotes, was a line item, adjustment to inventory valuation per VL. C. Directive, write-up of £4. 1M pre-close. I looked up. You inflated the inventory. I aligned it with market expectations. She said, Sebastian needed the numbers to hold through the merger. Without that adjustment, the deal died. With it, Ashworth passed due diligence. And the pension liability? Buried in a footnote in a subsidiary filing no one reads. She said, by the time the UK regulators caught on, the money was gone, transferred to a holding company in Malta, Sebastian's holding company, and you approved it. I enabled it. She said, there's a difference. I kept reading. The memo was signed electronically. Ve, Lemford Goal. But beneath it, a handwritten note in the margin, clear with NC, prior to final sign-off. My initials. I stared at them. This is forged. No, she said. It's scanned. From an email you never remembered sending. March 12th, 2019. You were in London for closing. Jet-lagged. Half-drunk. I asked you to review the valuation. You replied, fine, just get it done. I printed it. Kept it. I never saw this. You saw enough, she said. And now, if the SEC starts pulling Langford's acquisition history apart, they'll find this. And they'll ask why the then outside counsel, you, signed off on a valuation that was materially misleading. And why that same attorney is now married to the CEO who authorized inflation. I set the folder down. You've been sitting on this for 3 years. I've been waiting for you to give me a reason to use it, she said. Last night, you did. I walked to the bar, poured myself a drink. My hand was steady. Had to be. You realize this doesn't just hurt me. It hurts Langford. It hurts Richard. It hurts every employee who owns stock. You think I care? She said. You've spent the last 12 hours dismantling my life. Nathan, don't lecture me about collateral damage. I'm not lecturing. I said, I'm calculating. Because if you go public with this, the SEC doesn't just investigate Langford. They investigate you and Sebastian. And once they start tracing the Malta accounts, they'll find the money that funded the Dublin wire. The same wire you used to pay him off for keeping his mouth shut about Ashworth. She froze. You didn't think I'd connect those dots. Did you? I said, Dublin to Caymans. Caymans to Malta. All part of the same cleanup operation. You weren't paying him for old time's sake. You were paying him to stay quiet about the pension fraud. You can't prove that, she said, but her voice had lost its edge. I don't need to prove it. I said, I just need to suggest it. in a whistleblower tip, anonymously, to the SEC, to the Financial Times. To Richard, she stood. You wouldn't. I wouldn't have. I said, 12 hours ago. But now I'm just returning the favor. My phone buzzed. Marcus. I answered. Talk. Elena's resigned from board, he said. Effective immediately. Press release in 10 minutes. And there's more. Someone leaked the Zurich wire to CNBC. It's breaking now. I looked at Tori. Timing. You leaked it? Not me, I said, but I know who did. The unknown number. The one feeding me Elena's movements. The one who knew about the hail clause before I did. Tori's phone rang. She glanced at the screen. Didn't answer. It's Richard, isn't it? I said. She didn't respond. He's known. I said. About Ashworth. About the Malta accounts. About everything. And he's been waiting for you to hang yourself. Elena was his failsafe. And the leaks? That's him. 2. Cleaning house without touching the paint. Tori sank onto the couch. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked small. He'll destroy me, she whispered. He already has. I said, he just used me to do it. I ended the call with Marcus. Sat across from her. Here's how this ends. You resign. Effective today. No severance. No golden parachute. You sign a non-disparagement agreement. And I don't forward that Ashworth memo to the SEC. Richard gets to bury the rest to protect the family name. And Sebastian? He gets nothing. Because without you, there's no trigger for the trust. And without the trust, he's just another guy with a subpoena. And you? She asked. I walk away. I said, clean. And if you ever come near Langford again, or me, I'll make sure every regulator on 3 continents reads that memo before breakfast. She laughed. Bitter. You're a better monster than I am. No, I said, I'm just a more patient one. I stood, grabbed the folder, and walked to the door. Paused. One more thing. The unknown number? It's not Richard. It's Juliet. Her head snapped up. Your assistant? She's been logging your calendar, your emails, your wire transfers, everything, since the day we got married. I said, I told her feed Richard what he needed to make his move, and to feed me what I needed to make mine. Tori stared at me. You set me up. I set the board up. I said, you just happened to be sitting in the chair when it tipped. I left her there, in the sunlight, with the bourbon and the wreckage. James held the car door. Home. Sir? Office, I said, and called Juliet. Tell her she did well. As we pulled away, I watched the apartment building shrink in the mirror. Somewhere upstairs, Tori was realizing the truth. The game wasn't rigged against her. It had never included her to begin with. The annual meeting smelled like cheap coffee and expensive cologne, standard shareholder mix, pension fund reps in off-the-rack suits, hedge fund guys in custom Italian, and a handful of Langford retail investors who still believed in the myth of the family name. I didn't bother with a seat near the dais. I stayed in the back, next to Marcus, watching the room fill. Richard Langford walked in 10 minutes late, using a cane now, more theater than necessity. He nodded to the board, ignored Elena's empty chair, and took his place center stage. No gavel. Langford didn't do gavels. They did gravity. Thank you for coming. He began, voice rough but steady. As you know, recent events have required the board to take corrective action. Today, we'll address those actions and outline the path forward. He didn't mention Tori. Didn't need to. Her absence was a headline. Murphy stood before we opened the floor. I'd like to formally announce the board's acceptance of Victoria Langford Cole's resignation, effective immediately. The governance committee has completed its preliminary review and found substantial evidence of self-dealing, undisclosed related party transactions, and breaches of fiduciary duty. We've notified the SEC and initiated cooperation with their inquiry. A murmur rolled through the room. Someone near the front asked, "What about the Hale Trust?" Richard answered, "The trust in question is currently subject to a restraining order obtained by the company's counsel. The shares in question, 18% of Class B common, will remain frozen pending resolution of the SEC's investigation into Mr. Hale's activities. They cannot be voted, transferred, or encumbered. And Elena Park? Another voice called out. Ms. Park resigned from the board yesterday. The company is conducting an internal review of her communications with interested parties. We'll have no further comment on personnel matters. Standard dodge. But it worked. The room settled. I felt a presence at my shoulder. Turned. Tori, black suit, minimal makeup, hair pulled back. She looked like a woman who'd spent the last 48 hours deciding whether to disappear or detonate. You're enjoying this, she said quietly. I am observing. I said, there's a difference. You set this up months ago. I recognize the setup. I said, yours, Sebastian's, Elena's. I just made sure I wasn't the one sitting in the trap. She leaned closer. You think this ends with a restraining order? You think the SEC cares about your little memo? I've got lawyers who'll drag this out until you're gray. Maybe, I said, but by then, the Ashworth files will be in the hands of 3 different regulators, 2 congressional committees, and every major financial journalist in London and New York. You'll spend the next decade in depositions. Tori, not prison depositions. And that's worse. Prison has an end date. She studied me. You're not even angry anymore. Anger's inefficient. I said, I'm something better now. Done. She laughed. Dry. You always were a cold son of a bitch. And you always underestimated what that meant. I said. She turned to leave. Stopped. Richard knows. Doesn't he? About all of it. He's known since Malta. I said, he just needed a way to clean it up without his fingerprints. I gave him that. And what did you get? Peace of mind. I said, and a reminder that blood doesn't mean loyalty. Performance does. She walked out, didn't look back. Richard wrapped the meeting in 20 minutes. No drama, no surprises. Just a recap of the numbers, a reaffirmation of the dividend, and a polite request for continued support. The room emptied fast. Shareholders didn't stick around for the credits. I stayed until the last board member left. Then I walked to the podium. Richard was still there, gathering papers. You wanted to see me. I said. He didn't look up. You handled it cleanly. I handled it legally. I said, there's a difference. Semantics. He finally met my eyes. You could have gone public. Could have burned the company to the ground. Instead, you gave me a controlled demolition. I gave you a way to save the name. I said, not the company. The name. There's a difference. Why? Because I'm married into the name. I said, and I don't like being embarrassed. But mostly because Tori wasn't the problem. She was a symptom. The problem was a board that let a CEO use a company as a personal piggy bank. You let it happen. Richard, you signed a waiver on the trust. You approved the Dublin payments. You looked away at Ashworth. He didn't deny it. Just sighed. What do you want? Nothing. I said, I'm done. I've already instructed my attorneys to prepare the dissolution paperwork. Irreconcilable differences. No alimony. No claims against Coal Capital. She keeps her sins. I keep mine. And the Ashworth files? Locked in escrow. I said, trigger clause. If she or anyone connected to her initiate a civil or criminal proceeding against me, the files go live. To everyone. He nodded slowly. You've thought this through. I've had 3 years to think it through. I said, longer, if you count the London trip. He extended a hand. I didn't take it. Not because I was petty. Because some bridges don't get rebuilt. They get demolished. And you salt the earth so nothing grows back. Goodbye. Richard, I said. Nathan. He called after me. You're a better Langford than any of us. I didn't turn. Just kept walking. Outside. The sun was low. James was waiting. I got in the car. Pulled out my phone. One unread message. From Juliet. Filed the dissolution. Escrow confirmed. Ashworth package secured. Do I delete the backup? I typed back. No. Keep it. In 2 places. One onshore. One off. Just in case. Then I opened a new thread. Typed a single line. to Tori's private address. Consider this the last time we speak. If you build something new, don't put my name on it. If you burn something old, don't expect me to warm my hands. Good luck. You'll need it. Sent. I leaned back, watched the city slide past. Somewhere, Sebastian was realizing the trust was frozen solid. Somewhere, Elena was updating her resume. Somewhere, Tori was opening my email and understanding, finally, that the man she'd married hadn't been ruined by her games. He'd been sharpened by them. James glanced in the mirror. Home. Sir? Office. I said, I've got a portfolio to rebalance. He nodded and merged into traffic. I looked at my reflection in the window. Same jaw, same eyes, different man. The one Tori had created, then failed to recognize. The one Richard had tried to use, then failed to control. The one who'd learned that in this city. You don't win by playing fair. You win by knowing when the game's over and walking away before the house lights come on. I closed my eyes. For the first time in 3 years, I slept